The Magic the Gathering Dungeons & Dragons set has been an absolute feast for the imagination, with a number of amazing concepts coming along. But what I wasn't expecting to happen was to find a card that excited me enough that I instantly wanted to build a deck concept around it. But that has happened, so I present to you, my friends, the Endless Ooze.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. The Magic Historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings! Owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends, I hope the day finds you well. This is a bonus spoiler video. Normally I only do one video a day, but I saw this card and I got pretty excited about some silliness. I figured that we could do a spoiler / deck construction concept where I give you a core idea for a deck and you can run off and play with it if you want. I'm going to slide this concept into my big green tower. So here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about the flavor and the newly spoiled card, and then we'll talk about the ridiculous and fun concept that I have to go along with it. So, we're talking about the Ochre Jelly. This is 1 green and X for a 0/0 ooze creature. It has trample. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, and most interestingly, it has the split ability. When Ochre Jelly dies, if it had 2 or more +1/+1 counters on it, create a token that's a copy of it at the beginning of the next end step. The token enters the battlefield with half that many +1/+1 counters on it, rounded down. So, if you just put this out, let's say you pay 1 green and 2, you put this out as a 2/2, when it dies, it's going to split, and you're going to end up with a 1/1 jelly. Now, if you're not familiar with the idea behind Ochre Jellies, this is essentially a similar level threat to a Hydra, where if you don't go about destroying it the right way, you end up with a bigger problem, or at least a continuing problem. The way the Ochre Jelly is set up, it's going to be progressively smaller, whereas a Hydra does regrow the same size heads. But either way, if you played Dungeons & Dragons for a while, you're probably familiar with dealing with obnoxious oozes in different various forms. Ones that are immune to particular types of damage, ones that absorb particular types of damage and grow bigger, and then ones that just split off into multiple iterations, right? So the Ochre Jelly is a really obnoxious enemy to deal with, and you can see that on display in the artwork. I mean, look at the Paladin. He's all like, ah! He's got his shield up with another individual crouched on it, which actually looks really awesome. This is a heroic pose, but things don't look very good for them in these circumstances. Now, we actually got 2 variations of the Ochre Jelly. There is also the dungeon manual style version, which looks quite different. I actually like this version better than the other one. It feels a little more simple and straightforward, with the previous artwork feeling like the focus is actually more on the dungeon characters as opposed to the monster they're facing. And I'm a sucker for these old school Dungeons and Dragons style like pages for the books. Oh, you know what? I just realized they have different colors in the background for these cards. Does that actually correspond to the color of the card? That might be what's going on. Ho ho! Subtle. Actually, not really that subtle. I'm saying that so I don't look like a fool for missing it. So, the idea behind the Ochre Jelly is that it's going to keep splitting as long as you can make it big enough. Now, my first thought immediately with this was Vorinclex. I'm like, Endless Phyrexian Ooze! What a fun idea. So Vorinclex is 2 green and 4. He's a 6/6 trample haste Phyrexian Praetor. And here's the most important part. If you'd put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kind of counters on that permanent or player instead. Obviously, if you have this out and you have the ooze out, as long as you made the ooze 2/2 in the first place, you put down Vorinclex, when the ooze dies, it's going to split into a smaller ooze, right? You're going to cut those counters in half. So normally you'd go from 2 to 1, and you're going to put 1 counter on the new ooze, except Vorinclex goes, oops, double it. So now all of a sudden, you've got at least 2 counters on it. If it was just 1 counter, now you've got 2 counters, right? So if it dies, again, it's going to split. So as long as you have Vorinclex on the board, you're automatically going to be able to refresh your ooze over and over and over endlessly. And then on the other hand, you also get the bonus of, if your opponent's getting counters, let's say they've got an ooze, they've got to cut those counters in half, right? And same with planeswalkers and stuff. So you can just be like, ha ha ha, you slow down while I go endless ooze action. Now I understand that it's not the most resilient combo in the world. You can easily destroy either of the creatures. I mean, if you destroy Vorinclex, then obviously the ooze is going to be able to continue. If you destroy the ooze while Vorinclex is out, then the ooze is just going to continue to be endless. There are exile effects you can use as well, but Vorinclex isn't the only card I have for you that will assist in this. Now, the cards I'm going to talk about today are all specifically restricted to standard. So you can take this concept and expand it out into whatever format you want. But if you can't get your hands on Vorinclex because it's too expensive a card, or you just want more redundancy in the deck for your Endless Ooze options, we also have the lovely little Renata Called to the Hunt. So she's 2 green and 2 for a star 3. Her power is equal to your devotion to green, so that's however many green mana symbols you have and all your stuff on the board. But the important part is the second ability, which is each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter. Now, clearly, this isn't as good as Vorinclex. It's not going to double the counters. It's not some powerhouse maneuver. However, you only need one more counter. For the ooze to be truly endless and to be able to come back every single end step forever, you just need to be able to give it an extra +1/+1 counter. And Renata being out automatically makes that the case. And I just like the idea of this demigod who keeps blessing this little ooze, and it splits and she blesses the split and it's just zoom, 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 zoom. I love the thought of like demigods and Phyrexian praetors, these more important beings, these legendary creatures, just, hey, I summoned you up. Why? Beef up my ooze boy. It's like, really? Yeah, keep doing it. Every time he shows up, beef up that ooze, beef up that ooze, beef up that ooze. I don't know. It just tickles me. It's fun. You know what I mean? And actually, since she's up on the screen, I have to say, I love this artwork. It's great. She looks like an amazing hunter. Her spear looks incredible. And the Nixian aspect flowing in her hair and in the shadows of her clothing look absolutely amazing. So I have a few other cards that I think would be fun to use in conjunction with this setup. Now, it's obviously up to you. You choose what to use. But I figured a few more cards wouldn't be amiss to mention. So we've got the Oran Reef Ooze, which seems like a great friend. It's another ooze. It's 1 green and 2 for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So you can either use this to make the Oran Reef Ooze a little bit bigger, or you can use this as another way to get your Ochre Jelly up to being a 2/2, or bigger and beefier, depending on how you want to do things. And then it also has the ability, whenever Oran Reef Ooze attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature with a +1/+1 counter. So you can use this and your Ochre Jelly to keep swinging in and beefing up. That's fun, right? I mean, I'll admit, I don't really like the Oran Reef Ooze artwork because it just looks like a big old glob of snot to me, but it definitely has the ooze aspect to it, right? You're not going to look at that and think that's anything else. Now, that's not the only card that I have to suggest. I also have the idea of the Swarm Shambler. So this one is 1 green for a fungus beast that comes into play with a +1/+1 counter. So basically, it's a 1/1 for 1. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. I like the idea of anytime your opponent's trying to mess with any of your ooze boys, it's like, ha ha, I got a little fungus. Yeah, that's what you get. Get fungused up, brother. And this thing can grow too. If it's just left to its own devices, just one tap it, you can just keep putting extra counters on it. Turn after turn after turn. And obviously, if you have something like Vorinclex already on the board, then this little guy becomes even more fun. You know, it is definitely a weird looking card when you look at the artwork. You can see it's a beast with fungus on the back, but it seems like a good choice as an include for a silly little Endless Ooze concept. And then we have Inscription of Abundance. I like this because it's a little tricky style maneuver that you can use at the last second. It's an instant, right? So it's 1 green and 1 for an instant with a kicker of 1 green and 2. You get to choose one option, but if you kick the spell, so if you pay it for 5 instead, you can do as much as you want of this card's ability. So the first one is put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature. This is your surprise! The ochre jelly's actually bigger than you thought it was going to be, and he's coming back when you thought you were getting rid of it. Endless Ooze! You know, like, I like that. That's fun. And then you've got target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures they control. So you can use that on yourself. Obviously, why are you going to give your opponent a bunch of life, right? So if you have a giant ooze, or if you've made that little fungus buddy into a big beefy boy, you can get a bunch of life too. And then the final ability is target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. And this is a great way to have your ooze fight something, get rid of it, and if your ooze dies, who cares? Because you're playing Endless Ooze, and the ooze shall rise again. So if you play this deck, obviously when you beat your opponent, you have to go, you la ooze, because that's just obnoxious. So why not, right? So my friends, I hope you enjoyed this concept of talking about a spoiler and some silly shenanigans you can do with it. I know that ultimately it's not that powerful of an idea, but just the endless Phyrexian ooze concept sparked my imagination. So let me know what you think about this video concept. Maybe we'll do some more of these little deck concept slash spoiler videos in the future. But this is where the video ends. Thanks for coming by. Big shout out to all my patrons for supporting my channel, and I will see you all in the next video. Link to my spoiler playlist on the screen right now.